Mr. President.
I recognize the senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, did you see over the weekend Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, dancing on a stage with a chainsaw? Did you see that? Most Americans did. That was his approach to DOGE, government efficiency. Take a chainsaw to it. Put an agency like USAID in the wood chipper, in his words. Does this sound like a thoughtful approach to making government more efficient? Or does it sound like a meat axe approach of a man who has no business being there? An unelected individual who somehow has been given authority by this president to lop off tens of thousands of jobs day in and day out. Yes, we've gone to court. Many of the agencies of the government, the employees and their representatives have gone to court to question this ham-handed approach to making this government work. And they've been successful in the overwhelming percentage to receive temporary restraining orders and the like, because on its face, serious questions are raised as to the authority of this president. We've got time-honored traditions when it comes to things like impoundment of federal funds. The president cannot make that decision unilaterally. The power of the purse happens to be with the Article I agency of our government, the legislature, not with the Article II agency, the executive. And as a consequence, when the president decides to do this unilaterally, he is being challenged in court, and he should be challenged in court. This is not just a political issue, as one senator just described. It is, more importantly, a constitutional issue and a legal issue. And it's going to be resolved ultimately by the court. Perhaps the president will win some of his cases and lose others. But this is a legitimate exercise of the authority under the Constitution. And I might add that this notion that we're going to start lopping off air traffic controllers and people responsible for aviation safety, I would just say to those who are for that and believe that's draining the swamp, pay attention to what's happening across America. These terrible aviation disasters, like the one that happened here in Washington, D.C., should be taken seriously by us every day. And putting people in charge of these departments who don't have adequate staff to monitor the flights in our nation is an act of irresponsibility as far as I'm concerned. The same thing's true with avian flu. Yes, the price of eggs is terrible. And one of the reasons is avian flu is killing off the flocks of laying hens, and as a consequence, we have fewer eggs and higher prices. There's a very real concern that this avian flu is going to jump from these birds and fowl into the human chain, and we'll face another pandemic. Do we want that? For God's sake, no. But the notion that we're going to lop off employees that are responsible for public health one after the other and somehow make this a safer nation is irresponsible on its face. Should it be challenged in court? Of course it should be. And I stand by that. I just want to say to the senator and others who make these comments, think about what you're inviting here, to give the president the authority this Congress has, authority under the Constitution, to just give it away. Are we going to give away our responsibility under the Constitution? Because of the popularity of this president with some members, I pray that we won't. On a totally different subject, Mr. President, I'd like to tell you about one of my constituents. He's a man from New Lenox, Illinois. It's in the suburbs of Chicago. Late last year, he received an urgent phone call from someone claiming to be a deputy in the Will County Sheriff's Office. This self-proclaimed deputy informed my constituents that he had missed jury duty. As a result, the deputy said, "There's a warrant out for your arrest." The man was stunned. "Don't worry," the deputy further explained. The man could avoid arrest and put the whole matter behind him. All he had to do was pay the fine. But he couldn't pay by check or credit card. The deputy directed the man to a local cryptocurrency ATM machine and told him to deposit $15,000 into the machine, pay the fine, and all would be forgiven. If you've been following the news, you might have guessed by now the man on the phone wasn't a sheriff's deputy at all. He was a scammer. And once my constituent deposited his money into the crypto ATM, it was gone. Gone. There was no way to trace the transaction to the scammer and no way to get the money back. This is just one example of growing and alarming trend of crypto ATM fraud. There are now more than 30,000 cryptocurrency ATMs in this country, and they are being used by criminals to cheat Americans out of their hard-earned savings to the tune of $114 million in 2023 alone. Most of the victims are senior citizens. While these scams aren't all identical, they generally play out just like the one I described. A stranger calls and pretends to be from the government or the victim's bank. They make claims of unpaid fines, a frozen bank account, a credit card in default, or even threaten arrest. The scammer then tells their victim that they must immediately go to a crypto ATM at a nearby grocery store, gas station, or convenience store. Often the scammer will try to stay on the phone with the victim throughout the scam, warning of dire consequences if they don't make their payments immediately. It's a way of preventing their victim from getting a moment to take a breath and just maybe realize what's going on. Once the victim arrives at the crypto ATM, the scammer will walk them through the process of depositing real money, cash, into the machine, buying a Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency, and sending it to the scammer's digital wallet. Last summer, a small business owner in my hometown of Springfield, Illinois, removed a crypto ATM from his store after witnessing senior after senior walk in, talking on their phones, looking stressed, and depositing huge sums of cash into the machines. He said, quote, 100% of the time that we saw somebody at the machine, they were being scammed. This was in a small store in Springfield, Illinois. It wasn't just happening there. There are tragic stories of seniors losing their savings through these machines in every state in America. South Carolina, retired couple lost $390,000 over the course of several months to a scam involving crypto ATMs. Just this month, the sheriff's office in Walton County, Florida, reported a resident was cheated out of $129,000 through a crypto ATM. Mr. President, it's past time that we put some common sense guardrails in place to stop fraud in this largely unregulated industry. That's why today I'm joining with Senators Blumenthal, Reed, and Welch to introduce the Crypto ATM Fraud Prevention Act. This bill will require crypto ATM operators to warn consumers about scams and take reasonable steps to prevent fraud at their machines. It will also put in place measures to limit the amount that consumers lose when they do fall victim to scams, and will give law enforcement new tools to track down and fight back against criminals. I want to share a few of the key measures of this bill with you. First, the bill will provide special protection for consumers during the 2 weeks after they make their first transaction at a crypto ATM, the period when a consumer is most likely to be a victim of fraud. During this time, customers will be limited to deposits of $2,000 per day and $10,000 total. While this is still a lot of money, it ensures people's entire life savings are not put at risk. The bill will also require crypto ATM operators to obtain verbal confirmation via a live phone call for any transaction with a new customer over $500. Do you remember when I told you scammers often stay on the phone with victims until the money's been deposited in their digital wallet? Well, this requirement will break that communication, give victims a chance to think, perhaps reach out to another member of the family, and make sure crypto ATM operators can assess whether the customer is being scammed. Next, the bill requires crypto ATM operators to give prominent, clear warnings about the risk of fraud and to tell consumers about common types of scams. While warnings alone are not enough, they're part of the key to preventing fraud. Operators also will be required to issue paper receipts to customers after each transaction. The receipt will include, among other things, the date, time, and amount of transactions and a transaction hash, which will allow law enforcement to more easily trace the transaction, collect evidence of the crime, and maybe even recover the stolen funds. Next, operators will be required to use the analytics to screen for suspicious, illicit transactions. Some companies are effectively using this technology already. It should be used across the board. Finally, crypto ATM operators will be required to issue refunds to consumers who are victims of fraud. As long as victims make a sworn report to law enforcement and notify the operator within 30 days of the transaction, they will be entitled to a refund. New customers will get full refunds. All other customers will be entitled to refund of, at minimum, any fees associated with the transaction. Mr. President, these measures are common sense guardrails that will prevent countless Americans, particularly senior citizens, from losing thousands of dollars of their hard-earned savings to criminal scams. I urge all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me to pass this bill into law. We don't have any time to waste. Mr. President, I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of quorum.